Well, hello. Welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. We are having an episode this week about giants of ancient America. We have a guest coming on that is going to be enlightening us to all of the weird phenomenon that we find in giant bones and all kinds of stuff like that. His name is Travis Roy, and he runs an Instagram page called Giants of Ancient America, and that's giants _of_ ancient America. He's running that on Facebook and on Instagram as well. So before we jump into that interview, though, I'd like to just announce some things. We have upgraded to putting our YouTube channel out, and we also have a Rumble channel now. We're going to start putting, for those of you that are interested, putting the podcast on YouTube and on Rumble, so you can check it out there if you'd like. Also, we have the website up. I know some of you have already seen it, some of you have not, but that's a good way to connect with us a little bit more. You can ask questions or send comments or anything that you'd like in the email section. Our beautiful faces are on the About Us page if you'd like to see what we look like, or you just want to interact with us in any way. The website is a great landing page for that. Again, you can get our podcast anywhere that podcasts are playing, and if you want to send that out to your friends and all of that, we would much appreciate any type of help that we can get from you guys by sending it out to your friends and family, because we really want to get this message out to the masses, and that's really the only way that we can do it. So also, if you guys wouldn't mind giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, that really helps us to go up in the ratings, and the podcast is easily searchable and all of those things, the more reviews that you have. So just how the algorithm works, So if you want to get this message out to more people, that would greatly help us to do that by just simply writing a review. And it doesn't have to be anything special, but we will read each and every one of them. Also on Spotify, if you can subscribe and share, all of these things help get the message out. So with that, we're going to jump into the episode. We hope that you're enjoying all of the content that we're bringing you, and we look forward to bringing you more and more fringy topics as the days go on. So anyway, we love you all. That's so fringy. Okay, everybody, welcome to That's So Fringy podcast. We're so glad that you're back here with us. And we've got with us Travis Roy. He's a researcher and historian. And Travis, we're so glad that you were able to take the time to be with us here on our podcast. We've been following the Instagram page for a while, and just super informative, lots of news articles and things like that makes one go a little bit. How did you get into researching giants?
Well, hey, first off, it's great to be with you all. I'm glad for the opportunity to be on your podcast. And I started out probably, let's say, about 2010 is when I started to research the giants, specifically giants. And it was kind of I was already studying history, but I was studying Celtic people and their origins, which took me to the Black Sea, which is right beside the Caucasus Mountains, Eastern Europe area. Actually, it's right there. The Caucasus Mountains is part of like Eastern Europe, but it's also right near the biblical land. And so in studying that, I found out that giants were among the Celts, and which you could tell by looking at all the standing stones, megalithic structures through Europe and into Western Europe. And so that kind of led me into the giants. Now, I already believed in the giants. just based off my upbringing, just Bible stories, and I believe the Bible is true, but I never really looked into them until that time. Like I knew they were a thing. I was aware of how they came to be, based off the biblical text. So when I came across the giants while I was studying Celts, I I was like, I need to look into this more because I did not expect to find that they were among them. So I bought me some literature. I did some studies online. Finally, I decided I'm just going to do some of my own research and find if I can not discover these artifacts or not these articles, excuse me, of giants that were reported. Because some of these books I would buy would, it would mention that they were discovered, but a lot of these articles were just retyped. And so I didn't really see a lot of like newspaper print.
Mhm.
And so I believe them to be true, but I wanted to see it for myself. And so I just started finding so many. I just started to compile them onto an Instagram page.
Yeah, that Instagram page is very informative. When you see these articles from way back in the day where people have actually written about them finding the bones and finding these grave sites and things, it surely makes a person take pause and say, what is going on here? Obviously, major media sources were writing about it. Obviously, as you said, we see it in the Bible. We see all of these, characters in the Bible that are characterized as being giants or mighty men, all of those different things. And when you see that stuff, it makes you begin to, as you did, jump in and do your research. And we've done a ton of research, and we know others that have as well. It's just such a fascinating topic to me. Once you started digging in a little bit more, what did you find?
Well, I started to see characteristics that were repeated throughout different discoveries. So, for one, you would have the mention of them maybe looking like an ape. They said the ape men sometimes was the description, and then they would clarify what they meant by that. They would say, well, these people didn't have a forehead. So right directly above the eye sockets, it sloped backwards or back towards the back of the head.
Okay.
You would find a lot of these would have copper implements, or pearl bead necklaces. Another thing about them is their bone density they had very thick bones, and their skulls were about an inch thick, or sometimes more. And another thing I discovered too is that a lot of them seemed to worship the sun because they were either buried with their heads or maybe their feet facing the east. That was another thing that the writers of these articles would, suppose they would write that.
Well, and we
Make
see
that
that
note.
with the serpent mounds, or Graham Hancock just put out that Netflix series, the Ancient Apocalypse. Have you looked at that?
I did. I love that. I watched it. I need to watch it again.
Yeah, it was so great. I need to watch it again too. But a lot of the placement of the doorways or with the serpent mound, the head facing the solstice, and all those different things. It's so shocking when you find out that these supposedly ancient humans were creating these such monstrous things that were lining up with the sun and lining up with the stars and things like that. I really appreciated Graham Hancock's work on that.
Yeah, it was very eye opening, and I felt like people needed it. Well, people needed to hear about that and like have somebody, go against the narrative that's been taught.
Yeah. So when you started piecing this all together, you said that you had biblical origins. Talk to us about the giants in the Bible a little bit. Kind of that's our origin story, right? With the Bible, that's where we were we learn about the creation of the world. We learn about all of these different things, but we learn about also the fallen angels and what they did and how they started this seed war, as we've heard it called many times. And so, why don't you walk us through a little bit of the giants in the Bible and what that looks like?
So with the giants in the Bible, so you find that in Genesis 6 is their first mention, and it calls them men of renown or mighty men, men of old. So what happened basically is it says the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and obviously they didn't have that in heaven probably, and so they left their jobs, which were to be watchers, and then they broke the laws of God and came down, and they took whoever they pleased, but they created their offspring were these giant men and women, but these giants. So the question is like, how big were these original giants? I don't really know like how big they were, but the Bible does mention that they were here before the flood and they were here after the flood. So we have to assume that that means the whole context of that chapter is the flood and the things that were happening preceding the flood.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, in my belief, a second incursion. So the first ones, they might have been really big, but I know the second ones, the Bible states them to be about as tall as cedar trees and as mighty as oak trees. So we have to assume that they were pretty large individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty strong. Let's see here. The Bible mentions a couple of them by name. Were many different tribes of these giants too. Rapha was mentioned as like the patriarch figure of the Rephaim, which that's what King Og was, the king that Moses had to fight before they crossed over the Jordan River. So they actually fought a couple Amorite kings before Joshua took over. So Rapha was one, and Arba was the forefather of the Anakites, which was another tribe of giants. So from my research, it seems to be those two men were actual original Nephilim giants. So that's just kind of a quick overview of how it all happened.
Yeah. So transitioning to kind of more of what your Instagram posts are about, we find a lot of giant bones and a lot of this ancient architecture in America, actually. And for the skeptics out there, they would say, okay, but where are they? So where are all these bones at?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of times so a lot of times it wasn't like a university or a museum doing the digging. Sometimes it was, but a lot of times it was a workman or something, or like they were building a railway and they would just come through and they didn't know they were digging through it, but they were digging through a burial mound and they would find all these skeletons. And then the different like Carnegie or Smithsonian, sometimes some local Indian museum would be notified and they would come out and either get the bones. Sometimes the bones were so old that when they made contact with the earth, not the earth, with oxygen, they would just crumble. And they could get measurements off of these skeletons, but sometimes they weren't, like the whole thing wasn't able to be retained and shipped somewhere. But I would have to assume that there's still some somewhere in cases or crates somewhere.
Sure. I mean, we've heard of the Smithsonian being very involved in this ancient history findings of bones or other artifacts, and they kind of just swoop in and scurry them up really quick before anybody can have a good look at them. Have you found that?
Yeah, I actually have found that. I wasn't really searching for it, but in searching this stuff, I have come across a few articles about them. So one article was where they were let's see, here it is. Basically, and let's see, this is in 1891. They had an argument in a case where I guess they were getting some pushback for just showing up somewhere and digging into, I mean, doing some archaeological research or digging into mounds. And the pushback was like, can you do this? Do you need to call a coroner? And they were saying, no, they don't need to do that. So they were arguing for the rights to, research and dig up prehistoric skeletons. So that's in 1891
Wow.
from the Pittsburgh Dispatch. So it's kind of a long article. So in 1891, they were arguing for the rights to do that. In 1895, I came across an article where it states a dime museum was, basically going out of business, but there were some things there that caught the attention of the Smithsonian, and one was a 9-foot mummy of an Indian.
Wow.
And they sent multiple guys out. Let's see, it even has their names. They sent multiple men out to look at it, and they did tests, and they proved that it was authentic. And the end of the article says, let me make sure I got the right one. It's like a 3-page. All of the experts who have examined the giant mummy, which is nearly 9 feet in length, think it is a curiosity fit to be placed in the National Museum. So their conclusion was, yeah, they wanted it, and they were going to get it, and they were going to put it on display. So I'd never heard that they actually had them on display, but I guess they must have. This is 1895.
Yeah, it makes you wonder where they're at now, because if you visit the Smithsonian now, you don't see these artifacts anywhere.
Yeah. So keeping along that same storyline here, I found one from 1934, and a lot of people say that's kind of when you stop seeing the articles being published, and that's pretty true. Like, some of them are after that, but they definitely slow down. Like, I don't find a whole lot after the 30s. There's just a handful. So I found another article where basically states that the Smithsonian is fed up regarding the reports of prehistoric giants being unearthed. And this is from 1934.
Wow.
So
they're mad about
basement.
Yeah, they're fed up with it.
They have no more room.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no more room. They filled it up.
Wow.
Which, it makes sense that they would say that, because if there was something that had come about, maybe Darwinism, who knows, they could not control. They couldn't really control people finding these giants, because you had somebody building a cellar or adding a basement to their house, and they would come across this stuff, and then they would notify somebody, whether it be the coroner or the sheriff or somebody, and then it would get news would spread to the Smithsonian, and they were just getting tired of it. And by 1934,
I mean, wouldn't giants completely go against the evolution narrative completely?
Yeah, it would. It definitely would.
I mean, because evolution teaches us that we would be getting, we came from this primordial soup, after nothing exploded. And then after millions of years, we eventually became, apes. And then from there, we became humanoid. But if we were going from bigger to small, or I'm sorry, from smaller to bigger, and eventually becoming this, what we have now,
right?
Giant bones, or giants being anywhere from 7 foot up to 12 feet. I've heard that they've had. They wouldn't that kind of fly in the face of evolution, because that would mean that people were bigger back then,
smaller.
and then now we're smaller.
Yeah, we all see that diagram in the modern day school books. It's got you got the ape, and then it's a little taller. He's a little hunchbacked, and he finally makes it to almost about 6 foot, and then that's the end, right?
Yeah.
So that doesn't hold any water when you're finding these giants that are 8 feet tall or 19 feet tall, or, you've just got 9'3". So I would say
Hmm.
the average of the mound builders seems to be around 8 to 9 feet. So that's kind of like their average, but sometimes you've got a bigger one.
Sure.
So
That's crazy.
yeah, you're right.
So
You're
is
right on
there
that.
a place, like, I know you do a lot of stuff in, ancient America, but is there, you do it, you research for all over the world. Is there like certain
Yeah.
places that are like they have more bones than other places? Are they, is it like geographical in any way?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I would say Europe has quite a few.
Hmm.
Like France has
Mhm.
the British Isles. There's quite a few mentionings.
Oh
But
yeah, we've
I
heard a
found
lot
them.
about
Yeah, you've heard about that.
the British Isles. We've definitely heard that in our research come up, where people have not only found bones, but they've seen giants there.
Mhm.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah. And then even in Japan, like I found them as far as Japan.
Oh wow.
So, and they seem to be the same. Like you could, if you took away the words Japan and like the ancient civilization there, you wouldn't be able to tell you weren't reading one that was discovered in like Europe or even America.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Like they had the same customs, like these burial mounds. They were these people that were like on average 7 feet tall, and that said that they were buried in the area where the prehistoric origins of the Japanese people is said to have began. So yeah, it's a head scratcher for sure. But
Mhm.
the reason I don't think you can find, like, I've done research for like Israel, like there's got to be tons there, but I don't find a lot. And I think one reason is you didn't have in America, you had these people that were like moving westward, right? They're digging, they're exploring. I don't know if you had a lot of that because
Hmm.
there for a time, the Middle East was like a wasteland. And so you
Mhm.
had all these Americans out here digging and discovering things, and they were reporting things. So a lot of these reports are American papers. So maybe that's one reason I'm finding so many here.
Sure.
But I believe that there's a lot of them. There's got to be a ton in Israel and the surrounding countries.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would imagine, and that I mean, there's probably a lot of restrictions around where you can dig and where you can't dig. I know that to be true for America, where they'll swoop in and make it a national park, and now you're not allowed to dig there anymore. A lot of these
Right.
burial mound areas, they've turned them into government property, and so not only can you not dig there, but you can't even fly a drone over it, or it's
Hmm.
restricted airspace even.
Yeah.
So moving forward, how do you think the narrative has how do you think the Giants fit into this whole narrative of the Nephilim and the giants of ancient America? How do they fit in your worldview to ancient America? What do you think that they were doing around here? How do you think that they were interacting with the Native Americans and those type of things? What do you think that all looks like?
That's a great question. Okay, so yeah, I often try to picture this in my head because I'm finding so many of these reports, and America in ancient times was so much different than what we're told.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But there are legends of, Indian legends or Native American legends of these people existing um, alongside them. And it seems some of the stories aren't pretty stories. Like, I think it's around Nevada. There, you have the Paiute Indians and the Lovelock Cave giants.
Mhm.
You probably have heard that story.
Mhm.
I've uncovered a lot of giants in like the areas where the cliff dwellers were living. You've got a lot of them that are around 8 foot and taller. Lots of red hair. Uh, so they were
That's
living there, and
That seems to be a predominant feature of giants: red hair,
yeah,
cannibalism, stuff like that.
yeah, you're right. I mean, in a little further north, closer to the Ohio River, there's an Indian. The Shawnee Indians have a legend where there was a chieftain called Yellow Hair, and he was like around 7 foot or greater, and he had yellow hair, so which would tell me it's more like a blonde, maybe a
Mm-hmm.
blondish hair. And they were like a race of giants, and they were trying to share the land. They wanted to share the land, but the giants didn't want to because they were there first, and they ended up having a war, and they killed Yellow Hair, but he cursed them. He threw a curse on them. So there's like this legend of the curse of Yellow Hair that lasted so long. Um, so and even the Cherokee Indians in the East had legends of these tall people, and there was even a group that lived among the Cherokees that were kind of their leaders, and they couldn't really do anything about them. Like they could take any of the women they wanted to, and the mass number of the regular Cherokee people couldn't do anything about it. And it makes me wonder if they weren't giants based off of that tale. So
Mm-hmm.
I think they were just living among them, and then there must have been some judgments from God, because there are legends of that fire falling from heaven and destroying some of these giants. I think that's a legend uh, in Mexico somewhere. And of course, there were a lot of them in northern Mexico. So, yeah, that would be very interesting to see what it was like and how ruthless these people must have been.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and I imagine it would be weird, especially in America with the Native Americans, they have this beautiful skin and this dark hair. And then you see these like probably fair skinned, blonde or red haired giants. I mean, what a
Hmm.
contrast that would
Yeah,
be.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, they've probably never seen people with blue eyes before
Yeah, probably not.
or
Yeah, I'm sure it was like probably a shocker for whenever the Europeans came back over. Because I mean, we don't know if they were European, but they kind of had that appearance. But that's a whole other topic, like where they came from and why do they look the way they look and all that.
Mm.
So, but yeah, that's kind of that's my take on what it might have been like in ancient America.
Well, and it makes you wonder, like, how all across the world, they seemed organized in that they were building the same mounds and they were, they had a lot of the same practices, but they were scattered all over. Like, it's crazy because, they weren't picking up their cell phone and calling each other and being like, hey, did you want to place the feet towards the east or the head towards the east? They,
Right.
they, they weren't doing that, but they were somehow
Yeah,
still organized. Like, it
that's
just
right.
seems so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because they didn't communicate. I mean, you have people that it was years ago when I was first looking into all this. I found, and I can't find it anymore, but there was a YouTube video where somebody was interviewing some people that lived, and I want to say, yeah, it was like Easter Island. And I could not tell you that they didn't just move from Ireland because they had freckles. And they had red hair.
Hmm.
They looked just like Irish people, but they weren't from Ireland. They were from. They said they had come from Peru to Easter Island, and so
Wow.
they'd be like the mound builder type people, just remnants of
Hmm.
them. Obviously, they're not the same peoples, but so yeah, they went everywhere. They came from
Hmm.
one centralized location and spread to the east, north, and west. And then once
Right.
that happened, they just took the same basic customs with them as they built cities around the world wherever they went. And then they kind of like either like the big ones had judgments from God or whatever, and the other ones just kind of blended in with the modern or the local peoples.
Hmm.
It seems almost like they were being run off from everywhere that they were, because who knows what kind of temperament they had other than what we have heard about, which would be cannibalism and very aggressive and those type of things. It makes you wonder if the reason that they were in all of these different areas of the world is because they were being kind of ushered away from regular humans saying, hey, we don't want you around us anymore. And they almost became extinct by just causing too many problems, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There is a word in the Bible. Well, it calls them mighty, right? So like when you look at the word mighty, It means to be Gibor. It's a Hebrew word, and it just means powerful or mighty, strong. Well, there's another one in the Bible too, and I think it's Azaz or something like that. But it means this. It has like this, and it just is describing the same type of people. But it's mighty, strong, but it also has an added definition: fierce. So, and it's more describing a group of them that were living among regular sized people, but they obviously would be the leaders, but they weren't doing it in a humble manner. They were obviously very fierce leaders among these mound building groups of people, because sometimes in the mounds you'll have a giant buried next to a more regular sized person, and they're obviously the same age because they're like the bones look the same. So I'm not saying that every single one of these mound builders were giants, but their hierarchy and their leaders were giants.
Mm.
And that's,
well, and that kind of goes along with the, if kind of how humanity works, or how any type of powerful situation works, where you have one human being or a giant in this case over another group of people. It's the person with the most power, that gets to have to enjoy the headship of that area, whether it be their king or their chief, whatever the context was for them. It's not really a big jump of the imagination to think, well, you're bigger than all of us, so you get to be in charge because we don't want you to beat us up and kill us.
Right. Yeah.
So I think we see a lot of that when we find them as being, with certain headdresses, have been buried with certain headdresses and adorned in ways that would give you the understanding that they are some sort of a leader of those tribes.
There was one story, I don't remember the specifics, but it was like a giant that they found buried with like a whole bunch of like little people, like dwarf type people. Like,
yeah.
I don't remember where it was, but I remember reading that story thinking,
yeah, it was up in the Dakotas somewhere.
Okay.
And yeah, you're right. Yeah. So like, that's the same sort of thing. Like, he was obviously their leader,
right?
Because they didn't really have a say, probably, in that situation, in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
especially in that situation.
Right. Yeah.
So, two-part question:
mm-hmm.
Why do we care about giants right now? Like, why does it matter in this day and age? And are they still here? Are they still with us?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, for the first part of the question, like, why do we care about it, and why is it important now? That's a great question, because I've been doing this for a while, but it seems like in the past, since 2020, it really has taken fire.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, and people are like really looking into this stuff. And I think one reason is it's truth. And
right.
it's a truth that's been hidden from us. And another thing I think of is, I think the Lord wants it out there for some reason. Mm-hmm. He wants it to be revealed to people. And if they are, to answer part two, if there are any around still, that's another reason why we need to know the history of what our world actually was like, and maybe not that long ago, and still maybe not even now. There are so many different theories. There are stories of people seeing them in Afghanistan. There are stories where people think they may be related to, like, what people call Bigfoot or Sasquatch. There are stories of people saying they see them in like the Solomon Islands still. Some people say, well, they live underground. And there's so many stories coming from Afghanistan, you almost can't not believe them. Different military people seeing them with their night vision. And
there's so many different cave systems there that it's like, how could you possibly track them all down? There's just no way.
Right.
Well, I've heard people say, people that have spent time there in the military have said that when you kind of go into some of these places in Afghanistan, it's like another world. They don't understand regular the regular world as we understand it. Their tribe has been there for generations, and
Yeah.
they're kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's very difficult to get there.
It's hard for us to even imagine a life like that,
Yeah.
But it is still there.
It's basically like it was 300 years ago. Is that what you're saying? Basically, like a lot of those communities are still living the way they were back then.
Yeah. So the idea of a giant roaming around in there without being seen by Americans would be pretty easy, but the locals have seen them, and there's been lots of reports of the locals saying, "Oh yeah, those guys live right over there."
Yeah. Yeah.
Or isn't there ones where they'll like put out goats, or they'll put out livestock for them just like as a peace offering, so they stay in their cave and then we stay over here?
Right. I've heard that, and they were surmising that it was probably the men there would like dye their hair like this odd color, orange or reddish color, and then they would do the same thing to the goats, right? And then the goats would be gone. So they're just this military guy putting two and two together is like, well, maybe they're giving these giants an offering. It makes sense, and it makes sense that these giants are not dumb, and they probably know to try to stay hidden for the most part, especially if U.S. people are over there, like military, and they're shooting stuff up, they're seeing it, so they probably know when to like stay hidden, and maybe a lot of them are coming out at night and they're seeing them on their night vision, scopes and goggles or whatnot.
Sure.
Is there any validity to we know that they have sometimes this red hair, blonde hair, but to their eye sockets being bigger? Like I've heard some things that maybe their eye sockets were bigger because they are nocturnal. They come out at night, so to allow more light in or something, or maybe because these caves are so dark. Have you heard anything about that?
I have heard that they're like, okay, so in the skulls that they were examining down in Peru, they say that the eye sockets are like 50% bigger.
Yeah.
Now I'll have to do a little closer look on these reports. I can't think of one offhand where it said the eyes are really big. But that's not to say that it's not mentioned sometimes. Because sometimes they just say, they just focus on the height or focus on how thick the skull was or how big the skull was. But yeah, that's a good question. I would tend to say yes, that they would be bigger and thus possibly be nocturnal.
Yeah, you would almost have to be whether they were originally or they became
like they had to.
They almost evolved into being more nocturnal because of having to hide, dwelling in caves or underground, things like that. That would make sense to me.
Yeah, and I could see that. That's kind of how the Lord designed his creation, to adapt a little bit, and I think that's where Darwinism just took it and went crazy with it. Because you could have people like, I just saw a video today of some people living in the Amazon, and the men there, their feet look almost like hands because they don't wear shoes, and they walk around and they actually look like hands, and they can grab things with their toes. Well, of course mine can't do that because I'm always in shoes. So that's not Darwinism. That's just you adapt to what you're living in. And then, so I could see how if you lived underground all the time and you came out at night, well, you're going to see a lot better in the dark. You might even see better than in your cave once you got outside because there's some moonlight. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So what does your process look like? Where are you finding, because you're not going to libraries all over America and scrolling through their little Rolodex thing. Like how are you finding your articles? Because you've got like just tons.
Yeah. Okay. So I go to like the Library of Congress website, and it's just public domain, and you can go and just type in any search word and it's going to bring up, 300 pages, of newspaper pages. And so you just have to go through each one, and sometimes it's not fun. And the more words you put, the less it brings up. So like if I put in, say, Texas burial mound, it will bring up 0. And that doesn't make sense to me. If I put in burial mound, it'll bring up a ton. So sometimes it makes me wonder if it's just like some sort of a setting to where it makes it hard to find
Mhm.
stuff. But
Well, we know
yeah,
that there's shadow banning on Twitter now from all of the documents and things that have been released, and we've been hearing about shadow banning for a while. It makes you wonder if sometimes
yeah,
these search engines algorithms get messed with.
they probably do. I mean, they probably should stop though, because there's better
Yeah,
things to do.
yeah. If you're bored, go find something else to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I think the implications of giants is so huge, especially when you've got a large community of people that are like, you know what, we don't believe in the Bible. There is no validity. There is no evidence. And then when you go to try to point to evidence, here comes the Smithsonian snatching it up and taking it away, or you try to, like, I think it was Noah's Ark where they just recently thought that they found it, but it's up in this area in the Ararat Mountains where you just can't go. Like, it's completely fenced off, armed guards.
Wow.
And, the guys that are doing these studies are only able to get through by special, authority being able to let them in, because the Ararat Mountains actually covers 2 different nation states.
Yeah.
It's right between Turkey and I believe it's Iran. And so you have to get these special permissions. And it feels like everything that's important, the things that we would want to know about our origins and things like that, and the validity that makes the Bible come alive. All of those things are locked down. You can't go there. You can't fly over that. You can't dig there. Armed guard here, armed guard there. I mean, let's not even get talking about Antarctica and how you just can't go there, and they've got a whole military force down there. But it's just interesting, the things that we should know about our history, we can't. And so it's very helpful for people like you who have just decided, you know what, I'm going to dig in. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they do to me. I'm just going to dig in and I'm going to get this information out. So, kudos to you for putting in the time. Like you said, going through 3,000 documents is probably not a good time, but you do find those nuggets, those diamonds in the rough.
That's the fun part, when you find the good one. You're
Yeah.
like, oh yes, I haven't ever seen this one before. I've got to put this one out there.
Yeah. Well, we're thankful that you're doing that work, and, for the sake of your time, we'll start to wrap this up here. Where can people find you on obviously you have social media, Instagram. What's your handle on there?
Yeah. So it's giants_of_ancient America. So
Okay.
Ancient America, one word.
And is that the only place that you're posting?
I do that, and the same name on Facebook.
Okay.
So I'm doing Facebook too. Facebook gets a lot more views for some reason. Like,
oh wow,
I'll look at one post, it'll be up to like 32,000, and then another post will be like 300. And I'm not sure how it's getting. So people must just be resharing it or something, because I'm not doing anything like, how you can pay, to boost it. I've never paid to boost anything. So like, I just haven't done it yet, because I've just been throwing it out there. But yeah, so I'm on Facebook and on Instagram, giants_of_ancient America.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Well, Travis, we're so thankful again that you were able to take the time out of your busy schedule and meet with us. We really enjoy all of your posts on Instagram, and we wanted to promote you because we think you're doing good work. And we hope that all of the listeners out there enjoy your message, and hopefully it'll entice them to dig in more to these subjects, because they do matter. Giants, that's kind of a big deal. We would want to know that. And it does bring validity to the Bible, where it does talk about giants frequently. So again, thanks for coming on. We appreciate everything that you brought to the table. Is there anything you'd like to say before we head out?
Man, I tell you what, I think we covered a lot. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on with y'all, and thanks for reaching out.
Yes, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, brother. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk to you.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right.
All right.
Later.
Bye.